Hello, everyone. I'm not going to mute you unless you make me do it. So otherwise, I'll leave everybody live. Everybody was pretty well behaved last week, so I'm hoping we can do that again this week. So welcome to the third edition of the Tabletop group here in Altspace VR. I'm really happy that I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces here, but also I'm definitely seeing quite a few people that I think haven't been here before. Just kind of wanted to welcome everyone and just get the discussion going here and carry things into week number 3. So at our first 2 meetups, mostly we were kind of just making an introduction to tabletop gaming, just kind of giving a general overview. Last week it was real short because everybody was really distracted about the Altspace being bought by Microsoft thing. And now that we're back, and we got some separation from that. We concentrate on games again.
Normies.
So let's get into it. I'm Matt, and I've just been kind of organizing this as a way for people to get together and talk about games and play games. So what are we going to do this week? First off, I'm just going to go through a few of the introductory type things again. Some of you who have been here for multiple weeks might be getting sick of some of this material, but I just kind of want to set the stage for those of you who haven't heard it before. And I've also got some announcements because things are happening, and I just want to keep people informed about those things. This week is going to be a discussion. I don't have a featured game. We can play games after we're done. If you guys want to stick around, I mean, we're obviously in the game room. We could go play Love Letter. We could go play Boss Monster, whatever anybody wants to do here in Altspace. But more than anything, or spin the bottle if someone wants to code that up in the SDK, and we can have at it. Or maybe someone can just spawn an object in here, and we can make that happen. But anyway, this week we're going to talk about. So my plan for the next few weeks is to run through what I consider to be the pillars of tabletop gaming. So I'm going to start with my main passion, which is board gaming. And in future weeks, we're going to talk about other game types. We're going to go to next week. We're going to talk about card games, which is, I think, another one of the pillars. And then after that, which I know Dan and John and a lot of people who are here today are excited about, we're going to talk about tabletop RPGs. And then in the 4 weeks from tonight, which is going to be Halloween, we're going to talk about social deduction games and things like Werewolf, because I thought that would be cool for Halloween. And maybe, just maybe, we'll play a social deduction game.
Doing me a frighten.
Yeah, Dan, if you could do me a favor and...
I'm sorry.
No, that's right. So the on Halloween we're going to talk about social deduction games, and there is a great social deduction game that's rolling out here, and maybe we'll actually have a chance to play it, but we'll see. So tonight, like I said, we're going to be talking about board games, and specifically, I want to talk about what some people are calling the golden age of board games, and the era that we currently live in. And some people say it's the best time for board games that have ever happened in history. So why is that? What has your experience been? Do you agree? So we'll talk about that. And then just kind of what we've been playing for those of us who do play board games, or what we'd like to be playing. And then finally, I want to talk about a way that we as a group could expand beyond Altspace. I talked a little bit about it in the first week, the idea of Tabletop Simulator, which is a really awesome VR app for playing board games and RPGs and card games and miniatures games, all of the things, all the pillars of gaming. We're going to talk about that. So, I guess I can pause for a question, Cody. What's up?
Well, what if you have the Gear VR? You can't play on computer games with this.
That's true. Tabletop Simulator does not currently work on Gear VR, but Gear is an Android device, and there are a lot of amazing board game apps for the Android platform. And I do hope to be talking about that, as we move along. And then I think John has something to say as well. So, John?
Well, Tabletop Simulator is not a VR-only game. It is also available as long as you have a PC. Its requirements are actually fairly minimal. It's not that strenuous on PCs. So if you have at least a somewhat decent computer, you should be able to still play with your VR friends that you might meet up in here with.
That's a great point, John. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
Yeah, problem.
So some announcements. The first thing, you might notice that our friend Ghoster here is manning a camera. And that's because for the first time, we're streaming this back to the Hive network, which is a part of, is a community within Altspace that I participate in. We're a group of friends who help each other run our events and help us to, kind of build communities and build really active and engaged activities within the Altspace platform. And I just want to let you know that, just so you know that this is streaming to YouTube right now, and it's going to be archived there so that you could go and watch it later, and also so that you don't say anything you don't want to on YouTube. The place that you want to go to view that right here is the Hive VR. And Vivian, who runs the talk show that I think many of us are very familiar with here within Altspace, kind of one of the cornerstone, I guess you would call it, or central focus points for our community. She also is organizing a place for a bunch of us to put our content up there so that it can all be in one place. So go check that out. And the Hive B wants everybody to know that Community Book Club is tomorrow night. Shannon runs that. It's probably my favorite event. I think I'd probably be more excited about it sometimes than my own board game thing because I like to read. That's tomorrow night at 9:30. And I just want to make a big point of it because the event listing didn't go up until very recently because of some scheduling issues. So anyway, go check that out too. We're going to talk about Ready Player One. But anyway, we'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow night. Now we're talking about board games. So let me move on to the next slide here. Everybody who comes to these things every week is probably really sick of this slide. So I'm gonna talk it totally different this time. Ask me questions for anybody who wants a little bit of additional context. But what I see this is.
I have a question.
Sure.
We're talking about like 2D board games when we're really talking about 3D.
Yeah, I crashed.
Virtual reality.
So anyway,
I may have a few of those pretty soon.
So Mark, thanks for the question. And so yeah, I don't know what was said while I was gone, but the main motivation here is I wanted to create a place in virtual reality where people could discuss their interests in tabletop gaming and engage in gaming, because we have games here in Altspace, but also things like Tabletop Simulator, which I'm going to be talking about tonight, provide a virtual space where people can engage in their hobby together. So thank you for asking that question, because I think it's really exactly why we're here tonight and the concept that I wanted to introduce you to. And I don't want to limit it to any specific type of gaming. I want it to be any kind of gaming. Tonight we're going to talk about board gaming, but there's a lot of people here, who are very excited about playing tabletop RPGs. And I'm very excited too, because I've really had very little experience with tabletop RPGs. And I really don't know where I could go in my life very easily and pick that up. But I know that in this environment here, I've got a lot of willing and able participants. We just need to find a DM. Is what we need to do. So come back in 2 weeks, and let's talk about how we make that happen. So I think since I crashed and lost some time, what I'll do is I'll just move on into today's topic before things. Oh, one last advertisement. I keep making the pitch for this, but this is our Board Game Geek Guild. So this is our discussion forum where we can log in when we're not at a meetup, and we can talk about what games we play and what games we want to be playing in online platforms, including Altspace and Tabletop Simulator. So it's been kind of slow rolling getting people to sign up for this, but please, if it's something you're interested in, go check it out. Go for it, Dan. Sign up, go in there, go into the forums, comment on what you want to do and what you want to see, and we'll go from there. So just hold up, Cody. I want to try to keep the meeting rolling for. Yeah.
That comes /guild/34.
It is not. Board Game Geek is totally.
Never mind.
Board Game Geek is totally free, and it is the repository for all knowledge and goodness in the world of tabletop gaming.
Don't they even have their own conventions?
Created like 2 weeks ago.
So here's our first topic of the day, and this is what I'm going to talk the most. So if we get through the next 15 minutes, then we can have more of an open discussion. But I just kind of wanted to do my little preamble here. The term the golden age of board games, it sounds ridiculous, I think, to a lot of people. But I think for a lot of people, myself included, we feel like there's a renaissance in cardboard going on as we speak. Board games are developing faster right now than they ever have in history. And in the last 20 years, there's probably been more innovation and development of the board game industry and board game mechanics than there was in the 100 years that preceded it. There's more variety and more quantity of games being produced right now than there probably has ever been by an order of magnitude. I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up in the 1980s, and when I was a kid, you basically were either playing Monopoly or you were playing Risk, right? Or you're playing kids games. Those are the choices you had. And it's not that way anymore. I own like 200 board games. I want like 2,000 board games. There's so many good board games right now. It's just a matter of storing them in my house. Yeah. So that is how many great games there are and how much exploration there is that people can be doing. Board Game Geek, what I call the center of all things good in the board game world. Board Game Geek is kind of hard to describe what it is, so just go look at it sometime if you're interested. But just know that enthusiasts go there and they rank and they rate their favorites, and it really is a place where people can kind of make their case for what they think is the best, and you do reach kind of a consensus. But the interesting thing is, on BoardGameGeek.com, if you look at the top 100 rated games, and they have over 90,000 games rated there, of those 90,000 games, the top 100, all but 5 of them were released released since the year 2000, and the majority, I believe at last count, when I went in there last and counted, 52 of 100 of those were published in the last 5 years. So when you look at enthusiasts, it's pretty clear that they believe that right now is the best time and the best place for board game design. So if we accept the fact that it is the golden age of board games, or at least on some level, at least a lot of people believe this to be the case, why is that? What are the factors that cause that to be? So that's kind of what I want to discuss here real quick, and then we can come back and have a discussion about why else we think that might be the case. So first off, when did this all start? I think this is my particular model. I think other people see it differently, but in my mind, the golden age, at least the seeds for it, were planted in the 90s, and the seeds were planted by 2 games in particular. I think that completely changed gaming for the better. Not Cards Against Humanity, which I hear just being played by someone in there, but the first one being Magic the Gathering in the year 1993. It's a collectible card game. It's not a board game, but it was created by Richard Garfield, who, in addition to designing Magic the Gathering...
That's not a board game. That's not a board game.
He just said that.
Not a board game, but Richard Garfield... But listen to me for a second here, Mark. 2 things about Magic the Gathering. Richard Garfield, he actually came to Hasbro pitching a board game called Robo Rally, which is a great game. I like it even more than Magic the Gathering. But the truth of the matter is, Richard Garfield is a board game designer first and foremost. And not only did board game mechanics and board game design inform Magic the Gathering, Magic has been increasingly influential on board game designs from that date. In 1993, not long after that, we started to see games develop that had mechanics that were very Magic-like. And to our modern day, deck builders and other types of card games are heavily influenced by its design. But probably the really big one, and this is a board game, Mark, you can't challenge me on this one, is the game Catan. A really influential German board game that came out in Germany in 1995. It really didn't hit the United States in a really huge way until the very late 90s and the early 2000s. But at that point, Catan was just enormous. And I don't know if anybody can remember the first time, if they were a gamer at that time, and the first time they played Catan.
Great board game.
It was mind-blowing, right? It was mind-blowing, Mark, right? I mean, I was playing Axis and Allies, which is kind of a cool game, but it lacks the elegance. So I was in grad school, one day. We're playing Axis and Allies. For those who don't know, it's a kind of like a simulation of World War II, similar to Risk, pushing submarines and aircraft around and stuff. Lots of dice rolling, really fiddly. Takes forever to play, like 5 hours to get through a game. Still cool, but then someone plopped this little game on the table called The Settlers of Catan, which was this really elegant, really just, kind of fascinating new idea of what a board game could be. And that, in my opinion, probably is the moment that the Golden Age started. So, what are the major contributing factors to the Golden Age? Well, I've picked out 3. I think there's probably a myriad of them. And after we get done with this, I can already see there's interest in people kind of like having their own ideas. But these are my top 3. And you guys can tell me how wrong I am, what you agree with, and what you think you might add to this. But the first one is what I call kind of Euro games, or European-style board games spreading to other territories. So I talked a lot about this the first 2 weeks, so I'm not going to belabor it this week, but the modern board game definitely, there seems to be pretty much unanimous agreement that it was invented in the United States with things like Monopoly and the like. However, it was perfected in Europe by countries like Europe, and then later we started to see Italian and French developers who started to make a lot of really cool European-style board games. But what ended up happening is with Catan and games like Carcassonne, which I have pictured here, which came out in the year 2000, Euro games really started to make major inroads into markets like the United States and Japan and other places where they kind of merged with existing game cultures. And all of a sudden now, board gaming went from kind of a niche thing, the guy playing Warhammer down at the game store, or, the kids, trading Magic cards or Pokemon cards or something, or not Pokemon. That came along probably a little bit longer, the card game. But yeah, sure, all the games that followed on from that. But the Euro game changed all of that. All of a sudden now we had a whole different type of game. Euro games had a lot of really appealing characteristics. So there was no player elimination, right? Who likes that, right? You're sitting in a game, you get knocked out of the game, and you have to sit there and watch your brother and sister play for like the next 20 minutes, right? So, who wants that? There was less direct conflict. So all of a sudden now you didn't have to deal with, being attacked by stronger players. You can kind of work your way out. There were really high production values. Games went from being like these really cheap Hasbro things with like flimsy cards and like little plastic trinkets to being these really awesome, collections of cardboard and wood. Handcrafted by German craftsmen, I guess. I don't know. But they were just like really cool. And then relatable themes, I think, was another one, right? Not everybody's into like dragons and stuff. I mean, I like dragons. I think John likes dragons. I like spaceships. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people around here who like spaceships, but not everybody's into that kind of stuff, right? Euro games were about like building civilizations and having like the greatest farm, and weirdly enough that seems to be more compelling to a wider audience. So I think the spread of the Euro game was a big part of what kind of happened with the Renaissance, because I think it was a new game type that just really appealed to a lot of different people. So I put up this slide just because I showed it last week and 2 weeks ago, and Plix told me that it didn't show up correctly. So I just wanted everyone to see it more than anything, just because I spent time making it. But anyway, this is the idea of the American-style Euro game, which sounds like complete nonsense, but it's also kind of the concept. I really think you can trace the bloodline of something like Scythe, which was like last year's like consensus best game. You can trace that bloodline all the way back to Monopoly, and it's basically a hopping over the Atlantic kind of story of the ideas of board games going back and forth between Europe and the United States. And I think that's been a really important part of the modern board games that we have today. So what's my number 2 reason why I think that board games have really reached a renaissance in our current age? I think it's because that they provide an escape from what we're used to. I think Mark asked a really good question. Why the hell are we talking about board games and virtual reality, right? It's kind of a weird thing. But I think it's just because we all are in virtual reality, or because all of us live, very digital lives. And I think that board games provide us an alternative to that digital existence, right? We have to gather around the table and take out the physical pieces of cardboard and wood and talk to each other and interact, around the table. So, I mean, I think that, video games are awesome, right? I love video games. I mean, all of us are basically living in one side of one right now. So I think we all like video games on some level. But I think that board games just do something for me. The other thing is it's an intrinsically social activity. So I just kind of supplemented this with some pictures of, these are all the various game groups and conventions that I've actually gone to in my life. So BGG Con, Origins, and then here's a couple of real life game groups that I belong to. And, I feel like I have two circles of friends these days. I've got VR friends and I've got board game friends. And I know so many people that come out of those two different groups. Board gaming is really an incredibly, social activity and a great place to really kind of make those real bonds. And I think that you could draw parallels between board gaming and some other things that people are really getting into in the 21st century, like vinyl records and craft beer. Things that, basically didn't exist in large scales, in 20 years ago, right? Nobody was collecting vinyl records. Everybody's drinking Budweiser and stuff. People want alternatives. They want things that are special. They want things that stand out from...
Vinyl records are coming back.
Yeah, fucking hipsters.
Maybe.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me, Mark. I own 200 board games and 1,200 records, man. My house is just full of crap.
You'll be the DJ.
But anyway, I think that board gaming is it's not exactly the same thing, but it kind of fits into that same whole idea that people are looking for alternatives to kind of that mass market manufactured existence that's being offered to us, right? Board games are something different. There's something that have that tangible individual kind of feel to it. So I think that's my number 2. And what's really ironic is this is my number 2 reason, but guess what my number 3 reason is? The complete opposite. The number 1 thing, in my opinion, that's created the board game renaissance is the internet itself. I think the internet has given us a place to share our niche interests. And there's been all sorts of things that have happened as a result of the internet and board gaming. So there's a board game media now. There was never such a thing. I think maybe I heard in Germany in the 80s maybe you could see reviews in the newspaper of like the latest family games or something, but that's probably the only other example there ever really was. But today, we've got all sorts of YouTube channels. Here's the most famous example. Does anybody here watch Will Wheaton's Tabletop? Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, I see some people who do. So Will Wheaton, everybody of course knows him as everybody's least favorite Star Trek: The Next Generation character, Wesley Crusher. But anyway, he grew up and kind of became like a general purpose nerd, and he has a show where he plays board games with other humorous nerds, and it's funny. I enjoy it, and I think it's been really good for the board gaming hobby as well as all the rest of the board gaming media. The second big one is crowdfunding of small publisher games on platforms like Kickstarter. So now you don't have to be Hasbro anymore to make a board game. You could just be two brothers with a big idea for a game like Boss Monster, right? And we have that now, and that's here. And then finally, communities like BGG and so forth. And what we're doing right now, I really think that all of those things combine together. So don't forget, we have a community on BGG, by the way. So anyway, those are my big three reasons, and I just wanted to pause now because I can tell there's already a lot of interest in joining the conversation. So who wants to be first? John? I think I see your hand there. Yep.
Well, you mentioned before about the crowdfunding and stuff like that, where you don't have to be Hasbro stuff, but ultimately I think it comes down to marketing as well, cheap marketing. You no longer have to put a lot of money into just so you can sell your product. I mean, beforehand it was very discouraging for developers who would come up with these board games, because there was no guarantee that they'd even have a way to tell people about it, to sell it originally. So pretty much the rise of cheap communication, like the internet, is definitely one of the biggest contributors.
Absolutely.
Crowdfunding.
Absolutely, John. It's shortening. I mean, the great thing about the internet is the distance now between a product and its audience used to be like this, right? And now the internet is just bringing it right close together. I saw some other people who looked like they wanted to say something. Any other comments or questions at this point?
I have a small one.
Sure.
So
Dan.
going back to like why more tabletop games are so popular is that one thing I noticed is that things like Dungeons and Dragons have that other things don't is they have freedom. So in video games, even in virtual reality, things tend to follow their own set path, their own storyline. But in Dungeons and Dragons, things are truly free. You're really able to do whatever you want, as opposed to you have to sort of do what your character wants and what the story wants you to do.
I love it, Dan. So I
And
think what you're
that's something
saying.
that people really try to embrace.
So I think what you're almost saying is like when you play a board game or you play a tabletop RPG, you're helping to make the story, right? So you're not completely relying upon what the game is telling you to do. You are, kind of inventing the story with the people that you're with, and you're part of the narrative.
Exactly.
Awesome. I hadn't directly thought about including that in the presentation, but I mean that's a great point. And anything else that anybody wants to add to the conversation before we move on to the next part? John again.
Just to keep the conversation rolling. One thing that we can't ignore, though, is that there's been a lot of games that have popped up over the years that have managed to keep going. I mean, Hasbro, you think about their traditional games, well, they didn't all start at the same time as Monopoly. They have put out over the years. There's been more and more and more. There's been a few offshoots here and there.
The truth is, we've got thousands of great games that we could be playing, and there's still tons of new great ones coming out all the time. I think the first signs are starting to show that maybe things are winding down a little bit. There's a little too much going on business-wise, I think, that might be starting to cramp a little bit of innovation. Some of the smaller companies that used to be more innovative and then were working on kind of cool ideas that were out of the box, they've been bought by larger firms, and we're starting to see, maybe games are starting to become a little bit more similar. Just like the movies, a lot of board games now are sequels or second editions or fourth editions, or they're an expansion to an existing game instead of someone coming up with like a whole new concept. That while it's cool for the people who like those games, it might be slowing down the pace at which all that good innovation is occurring. And the last one is, more and more of these things are just becoming kind of like what people like to call miniature porn. So the idea of, basically really fancy, really awesome looking miniatures that are, yeah, exactly. So board games are starting to become a lot more like something like Warhammer, where it's about having really nice sculpts, giving the painters something to work on. Now the painters are cool. I mean, I know because
that's a sub hobby within the board gaming community.
Right.
Is the painting aspect and miniatures.
You don't need them.
But
they're nice. No.
But it's becoming a point though that I think the games that are making the most on Kickstarter, like the one that I've got highlighted right here on the last slide,
But Warhammer.
Kingdom Death Monster.
Decades.
Kingdom Death Monster raised $12 million on Kickstarter, which is I think the most by a board game by like $5 million, and it's more about the miniatures than the game. I mean, it actually plays pretty well, but I mean, it's the miniatures that are bringing in the money. But I don't want to be negative, right? I still think we live in the greatest time for board games, and the board game industry has changed forever. I think of it kind of like craft brewing, like 5 years ago, right? Before Budweiser and Coors started buying all the small microbrews, right? We're kind of at that point in time right now. But beer continues to be good, just like board games will continue to be good. And in fact, we should see it as a good thing, I think. I think what's happened is good board games have gone mainstream now. And people expect board games to be good. And therefore, that's good for everybody who wants to play really cool games. So anyway, that's the real ending. Any other thoughts based upon what I just said before I move on to?
I think the threshold has just been raised. The bar has been raised a little high, so I think that's one reason why we're seeing a bit of a lull right now. Wow, you got that right in my face.
Close up.
I would only chime in. I would chime in to say that Kingdom Death Monster, despite totally being miniature porn, that's an apt description. If you've ever sat down and played it, which is a trial of paperwork, it's a really solid board game. It's just a lot of bookkeeping and things like that.
And
like
expensive as.
Right. If they made a digital version of that game that kept track of all the bookkeeping and things like that, I'd probably play it for hours on end. But it's like a very complicated game that takes forever to learn and forever to execute.
No, that's a great point, Mike.
Board games are dead.
And you were also
Literally, board games are dead.
they're not dead.
They're literally dead.
What? No, they're not.
Yeah, they're not dead.
Yeah,
There's
they're
still
not.
new ones coming out. There's still new tabletop RPGs coming out, being reinvented. GURPS isn't that old.
I thought about chess and stuff like that, but board games are dead. Who plays
Why are you here?
Ludo? Who plays
I
Ludo?
play chess.
Pluto was dope,
I
dude.
play Monopoly. I play Snakes and Ladders. Oh yeah.
But
Snakes and ladders.
before you were
I
play
talking
beer
about
pong. Snakes and ladders.
new editions, but sometimes it's just reeditions, like they
play
just take the
Snakes
same
and
game
Ladders with
mechanics
your kids,
and
don't you?
re-paste it
Ah.
with
I
different
play
I play
cards
Snakes
and
and
something like
Ladders with
that.
my wife.
A good example. Good.
Yeah.
Play with my wife.
Sometimes they're just reskins of old game mechanics, and it's not any new game, it's just a new appearance. Like a good example is recently Wizards of the Coast came out with Betrayal at Baldur's Gate instead of a Betrayal at the House on the Hill, which is a fantastic horror. Actually, if you haven't played Betrayal at the House on the Hill, if you decide to get it, it's fantastic to play this month. It's inspired by all the classic horror game genre, or all the classic horror tropes and the like, but they reedited it for D&D setting instead.
Some of the
their
changes they
new
make
edition
look
of it.
cool for the Baldur's
Yeah.
Gate one. Like some of the,
Yeah.
I guess, additional
It-
layers of game mechanics
Hey,
look
Mark.
interesting.
Hey Mark, can
Yeah.
you hear me?
It doesn't really do as much though. And then you got
Presentation.
Dude.
sometimes the new
Dude,
edition
shush.
that they come out with is an improvement. Take for example King of New York or King of Tokyo versus King of New York. King of New York has a lot of game mechanics that were added onto it, and it definitely changed the game up compared to King of Tokyo.
No, and I certainly don't want to. I certainly don't want to, make it seem like I'm being really negative. I think
Yeah.
I just wanted. I felt like the first bit of the presentation was like rah 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 board games. So I thought I'd just get everybody riled up with a little bit of a counterpoint.
Yeah.
Cody, what's up?
When are we gonna be playing board games soon? or
So we've got more of a group discussion, Cody. But after that, I mean, people can play whatever games they wish. I don't have like a featured game tonight, so.
Okay.
But obviously there's tons of people who like games here that might be up for something in a bit here.
Like a meet and greet. Well.
I find you mentioned that games are going to sequels and whatnot, but you look at the Board Game Geeks top, like let's say you look at the top games that went up this year. A lot of them are not sequels; they're original IPs like Anachrony and
Absolutely.
Great Western Trail, which were just amazing games. I just recently got them, and I think both are really amazing games, and they're not sequels or anything like that. They're just original. So I thought it was I really enjoyed. I did really enjoy them.
No, I great. I mean, I have not played Great Western Trail yet, but I can't wait to try it.
Yeah, it's really good. I really recommend it.
Dennis, please.
How do you think that as far as board games go, like how do you think that a game such as like Twister could be put into like virtual like gaming like this?
Love
I would love to see that.
I mean,
That is
maybe
a
we'll have to
great
get some
question.
legs, we can talk about that.
That's what you
So, well,
call
first
party
off-
game, though. That's a different genre.
It's a party game. We are going to do a party game session though sometime, John, because I love party games. So
Oh, yeah.
that's coming. So that's valid. But Dennis, the question I have for you though is
Twister was never a family game. Twister was never a family game.
not the way most people played it. That's for sure.
Oh no. Oh.
But Dennis, wouldn't you want I would want full body tracking though. Like I want the perception neuron when I'm playing Twister. Maybe Dennis, you've finally given me my justification for why I need to buy perception neuron, so I can properly make a Twister app for Altspace.
Motion
And
capture in the VR.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Anything else? Because I do have a bit more that I want to get through. Anything? All right, now let's move on.
Go ahead.
All right, so let's talk about what we're playing lately, and this follows on very nicely from what Marcel gave us a couple great games, and maybe he has some others that he wants to talk about. But I'm going to go forward about what I've been. All right, we lost the slide.
No. Ooh.
Anyway, I had a slide for a game that I was going to talk about, but
Lost
regardless,
it to the abyss.
yeah, probably, yeah, whatever. Probably because I didn't use PowerPoint. But anyway, so the game I've been playing the most lately is called Soul. The Last Days of a Star. So it's a sci-fi board game. It was a limited kind of. So Mark, just give me a second to get through mine here, and then we'll give people a turn.
Sorry.
So Soul, the last days of a star. So the idea is, it's a sci-fi game. It's beautiful. It's a Kickstarter game, but it has a really cool theme. So the whole idea is, it's like an ecological idea that basically there was a star that was being harvested by 5 alien civilizations, and they just farmed the hell out of the star, basically to the point where they destroyed it, and now all the worlds are going to be destroyed. So the idea is these 5 civilizations are competing to collect as much energy as possible, and only the civilization that collects the most energy is going to be able to get away from the gravity of the star and go off and settle somewhere else. Kind of a dark theme, I know, but it's really cool because it's kind of your classic engine building Euro game, but instead of building a conventional engine, you're building a spatial engine where you have a variety of different types of manufacturing plants that you use to generate and transmit the power to your arc that you're going to be using to escape. But anyway, I had a really cool picture of it that I was going to show to you guys, but I forgot to, I guess, update the slide for the latest revision, but whatever. So anyway, what has everybody else been playing lately? I'm just kind of curious to hear what everybody's favorite game is. All right, Cody, I know you're dying to talk. So Cody, what's your...
Okay. What I've been playing recently, should I come up front so everyone can see me?
No, I guess camera's on you.
You're good.
Okay.
That's good.
Well, lately I've been playing Monopoly Gamer, which is completely different to normal
Oh,
Monopoly.
yeah. How is that?
It's where you take it's really good. It's different than normal Monopoly because there's boss cards instead of like you having money. It's coins and it's more easy to navigate the money. It's easier to be the banker. It's easier to be all the different characters, and the characters have power-ups, and all the characters have specials. And if you land on this, the spaces are different, so the zones are different, and it's really interesting because it isn't like a long game. It's more of a short game.
That's cool. So I've been very interested in that game actually because it's a Hasbro game that's been getting a lot of like really good press in the hobbyist board game market actually. Similar to, has anybody played Star Wars Risk Edition? Does anybody know what that is? It came out before The Force Awakens.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Oh, so Cody knows that one too. Yeah, it's another like mainstream mass market Hasbro game that was really, really good. And I've heard the same thing about Monopoly Gamer Edition. I have not tried it yet. Hobbyist game stores are selling it. It looks really cool. I like Mario, so I think I've got to give it a try sometime. So
you
cool.
gotta buy it. It's worth it.
Thanks, Cody. Anybody else want to talk about a game they've been playing recently?
I've been playing Junta. You heard of Junta?
I haven't. Tell us about it, Mark.
Oh, it's basically it's like a war game, also with espionage. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Sounds like fun.
Leave it up to the imagination.
We'll go to Just John and then Dennis.
All right.
So Just John first.
Well, I gotta just say I've been playing, Betrayal in the House on the Hill a whole lot. Like I said before, really good to play this time of year. Also, it's a genre you didn't mention, which is tile placement games.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I love me some tile placement. My favorite one is Suburbia, the city building game.
And I recently acquired the Rick and Morty Anatomy Park game, also a tile placement game. It's actually a lot of fun.
Right onto the bandwagon, aren't you?
Oh man, it's actually a lot of fun to play. My wife got it as a birthday gift from a friend.
So anyway, I'm gonna say one thing to follow up on John, and then we'll go over to Dennis. So sorry, Dennis, for the quick delay. But you just made me think of something, John. You know how like licensed video games are always terrible. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you ever play the Superman game
with the exception
Oh,
of what was
Yeah,
it?
it's
Like
like
there might have been one
Cyber.
Avengers game and the what was it? The
licensed
Riddick
games. Oh
game.
my
The
God.
Riddick game was
The-
supposed to actually be really good.
But you know
Nintendo
what?
64 Superman.
Those are the two examples of only decent ones.
But that's not true in board gaming, right? There's so many amazing licensed board
Yeah.
games. Like, has anybody ever played StarCraft, the board game? Holy crap, that's a great game.
I've seen a lot of
or-
indie board games that are
Star
better than
Wars
some of the
board
mainstream ones.
games.
Yeah, totally.
Firefly has this
Star Wars board games
huge
are so crap.
map-based
Oh.
galactic travel game. That's
Yeah, and so I heard two things that I totally agree with. So Firefly and Gale Force 9 games in general. Gale Force 9 has made nothing but incredible licensed games, including, in my opinion, the greatest D&D themed board game of all time, Tyrants of the Underdark. And then I heard Mark, I believe, you were talking about Star Wars, right? Like the fantasy flight, train that can't be stopped. Just one,
All Star Wars,
one.
all Star Wars board games are literally rubbish.
Oh, I disagree with you, sir.
Right under
You
the
keep
bus.
you keep coming here, and I will change your mind about that, because I have played no less than 5 Star Wars board games released in the last 3 years that I think are amongst my favorite games. One is a miniatures game, Star Wars Armada, but the others are all board games. So we'll talk about that after today's meetup.
What about something like Defense Grid 2?
a tower
I'm not
defense,
familiar with it.
It's a tower defense game for the Oculus.
It's pretty good.
Cool.
It's very tower defense games do play into a type of board game mentality when you're playing them.
I would
It's
agree.
very much like that.
All right, Dennis, we've made you wait long enough.
Yeah.
You have the floor.
All right. Well, this isn't exactly a game I've played recently, but I feel like a game like Pictionary would definitely have some potential in this kind of space.
So we talked about that at the last meetup, the 6 o'clock one, and we reached the conclusion there used to be something similar to Pictionary here, right? Sketchy
Yes,
quiz.
Sketchy quiz, yes.
Yeah. So it exists, but I believe it does not work correctly, and I think unfortunately I don't know that there's anybody around who would have any idea how to get it working again. So
No,
maybe we.
they've taken it out of Altspace in general right now because it was just too glitchy with gear users, I believe.
Oh,
Certain
okay.
update.
I see.
But I would
I
like
see.
to, but I would like to say for the Gear users and Oculus users out there is that they are going to be releasing a Catan VR game that they say is supposed to be cross-compatible between the two subsets, so you can play. So Gear users can play with Rift users potentially with that.
Nice.
I mean, and it's Catan. I mean, come on.
Awesome.
We'll see how that develops, though.
What board games have you been playing? I've been playing Monopoly.
Yes.
Awesome.
Magic.
So, John, my question about my question about Catan VR though is there going to be like a wave shooter mode where like there's sheep coming at me from all angles? You know, it's just like.
Throw the wood! Throw the wood! I got some wood for your sheep.
I mean, it's a VR game after all, so it's got to be somewhat of a wave shooter, right? I mean, come on, you know.
Can't beat Star Wars Monopoly.
What?
Someone in.
Anybody else want to talk about a game they've been playing before we move on?
So I will be
Anybody?
honest, though, the Star Wars Monopoly came out during the Phantom Menace. I had the clip on.
Not a board game. Anybody?
It's
Anybody?
So convenient to play
Okay.
with just the clip of the
Minecraft.
homes. No one
So-
took them over.
Okay. Last discussion topic for the day. And maybe more timely, because part of the reason I created this group was to give people potentially someday in the future, whether it's here in Altspace or somewhere in Tabletop Simulator or who knows where, what do you want to be playing that you're not playing, right? So the last question is, what kind of board games are you playing? Now I want to talk about the games that you want to be playing, but you're not. And my slide actually did come in for this one. So this is the one, this is like one of my absolute favorite games, but I get to play it once a year usually on my birthday because my partner is a board gamer as well. And she doesn't hate this game, actually. She kind of likes it. But at the same time, it's just like it's at least a 3-hour endeavor plus teaching if we're playing with new people. But it's called Duel of Ages 2. It's basically a reject RPG that was turned into the craziest board game known to man. So there's 200 playable characters. There's hundreds of weapons and items that you can pick up. There's about, I don't know, maybe 30 of these like giant terrain boards. So like these terrain boards are about this big, and there's a stack of them about this tall that you can use. It's a time some space alien from the 26th century or something like that.
Oh.
And they fight. And they fight each other with like weapons and vehicles and stuff that are from all their different ages. And the game has an awesome sense of humor. Like my favorite memory is one time I was playing, and one of the characters I had was William Wallace. You know William Wallace? That's Mel Gibson from Braveheart, right? He played the character of William Wallace, who was fighting for Scottish independence.
William Wallace is.
So William Wallace.
I know who he is.
William Wallace he was riding a skateboard with a machete, like he could be. So they have a kit where you can add any character you want, and I have created some custom characters. There is actually a Chuck Norris. There's like a fake Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
Like they didn't want to put
God.
actual Chuck Norris in,
Automatically wins the game.
Chuck Norris will be confirmed.
But so why don't I get to play this? Well, there's a couple problems with this game. Number one, it takes forever. Plus, it's hard to teach. It's a team game, which is always kind of hard to get people to play, right? So people are kind of familiar with the concepts of like, games where everybody plays for each other, or games where you're cooperating together. Woo! I teleported.
Whoa.
But Duel of Ages is 2 teams playing together. Technically, you could actually play it with 2 teams of 8. I've never heard of anybody playing it with 16. I'd love to see it, but maybe at a con sometime. It just looks completely overwhelming. I mean, this is the 2-player setup. This is like a full-size dinner table, and this is how much room it takes up with 2 people. And the art quality is highly variable. Like some of the art is like beautiful hand-drawn images. Other stuff looks like some Unity game that was coded by a 10-year-old kid. So like it's
All of them.
Inconsistent.
But so I mean it's really kind of. But anyway, I love it, but I never get to play it. So.
You can get really crazy with what we're talking about with the last game, humorous. And similar to your other points that you were mentioning, the other game I would like to play more often would be Twilight Imperium, which you're looking at 8+ hours to play the game. Always
so Twilight Imperium.
In between.
Twilight Imperium has the record of being mentioned in every one of these things. But anyway, I'm sorry, John, I interrupted you.
No, that was about it, I think.
Okay,
if
cool.
I did, I forgot.
Anybody else? Who else wants to get in on the game that they wish they could play but never do?
I wish I could play Through the Ages more often.
Yeah. That Civilization game by Vlada Chvátil, right? Is that
Exactly.
what the one?
Yeah, it is, and it's about a half hour per player. Maybe a bit more than that, but it takes if a 4-player game can take up to maybe an hour per player. Yeah, an hour per player. So you play a 4-player game, it's about a 4-hour game, and then if somebody's played a lot, it's hard for it to be fair because you get to know the combos and know which kind of things go well together. So since I play a lot, my girlfriend didn't play a lot, so she doesn't like to play because it's just a kind of unfair game, and but it's so good. I find it's such a good game because you end up building something, I wish I could play more.
I got to ask Marcel, have you played the new version of that yet that came out last year?
No, I haven't. Did you?
I haven't played it yet, but I'm really excited to. Yeah, I heard they really rebalanced a few things and did just the ever slightest bit of streamlining to make it more friendly to new players. So
and that would be great because it is a hard game to teach the new players because there's so much to know, right? It's so like a lot of these newer games have so many different components and ways to victory that a lot of new players get overwhelmed and don't really want to learn, or you really have to love board games to be like, all right, I'm going to explain to you how to play this game. It's going to take half an hour.
Right.
I feel like there are some games that are so overly complicated that you got to start them with a different game, but similar. That's the more simplified version. Like before you start someone with Twilight Imperium, start them off on Cosmic Encounter, which shares some similarities in how it's played. You got to work their way up, understand this mechanic in this board game, and then we'll introduce you to more stuff in this one.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good way to get things going.
Yeah.
There was also Space Hulk.
Yeah, Space Hawk, great game. I'm a huge fan. Yeah, so I like that kind of just fun dice checking kind of miniature. So Space Hulk is basically, I think, best as a 2-player game. The two factions against each other.
What I like about Space Hulk is like you could play it as like basically you didn't need the miniatures to play Warhammer 40k.
Right. A very pretty game too, especially in its newest edition. Space Hulk 4th edition really looks nice.
Oh, yeah.
I had a chance to buy a copy of Space Hulk 4th edition for like 40% cost at my local game store, and I passed it up. I regret that really. One of those periods of time where I was like, I own too many board games, and then I bought more shelves, and all of a sudden it's like, I do not own enough board games. But
The amount
didn't
of
happen.
board games I have at the moment.
Anybody else? Any games that they want to be put? Ghoster, you want to get in on this?
Risk. I'd love to play Risk again with my family. That was always one of those fun
That was
ones.
the first board game I ever got into.
Risk.
Yeah, it's the only problem with it is it takes so long to play, and everybody becomes so good at it.
But it's so fun.
Exactly.
And that's one of those games too. That's one of those games too where you can get eliminated, right? Like and like 4 hours later the game finishes.
Yeah.
That's always a bummer. But anybody else? Thanks for that, Ghoster. I'm glad we were able to get you involved as well.
What if we
Okay.
played darts?
Lawn darts. I wish I could be playing more lawn
Yeah.
darts.
There is another game. There is
Under
another
Arts
game
and
called
Multi-Ball.
Hero Clash.
Go in the back room and play Cards Against Humanity.
Oh, Hero Quest. There we go. There's a classic. It's a hard game to get a hold of these days. All right. So anyway, our last topic of the day, Tabletop Simulator. So I just wanted to go a little bit deeper. I brought this up the first time we got together, and I just want to throw it out there because there's a lot of interest in playing tabletop RPGs. There's a lot of interest in playing more board games. Well, maybe that's just me. I don't know. But I get the sense there's some more interest. And we've got some great games here in Altspace, right? We've got Love Letter. We've got Boss Monster. Cards Against Humanity, if you're into that. I am not. I couldn't get the laptop working with the Rift. So I am on my second gaming PC. And the 970 is definitely running pretty hot. Mm-hmm. So Tabletop Simulator, I don't know when I conked out. But anyway, let's just cut to the chase. This is a place where we can play a lot of games that we can't play here in Altspace, and we can do it in VR. And some of us are already doing it. Vince, I've played games with Vince in Tabletop Simulator before, who just joined us, and a number of other people here. And this is just a slide from one of my previous talks, but for those who aren't terribly familiar with Tabletop Simulator, it's a physics-based tabletop platform that is basically a template for cards and dice and physical objects. Not a whole lot of scripting, so you need to know the rules. And it feels very much like sitting down at a table and playing a physical game in virtual reality, or as John rightly pointed out earlier tonight, you can do it just in a two-dimensional environment. And because this game is from 2014, the requirements to run it are not super high. And it runs great on Oculus Rift and Vive, and it has cross-platform play on Steam. I don't have any interest in this. Like, I'm not like a stakeholder in this company or anything. I just like it. I think it's $20 on Steam right now. Official DLCs are somewhere between like $5 and $10 per game. I think, John, you pointed out last time we talked about it, generally speaking, only one person needs.
It was also before they on sale a lot. They don't just wait for the 2 big sales on Steam a year. They usually go down pretty often.
Very true indeed. And Oh, what'd you think?
Didn't like it.
I
Oh,
will
yeah?
say there is a little bit of a learning curve on the controls that some people
Yeah.
if they don't take the time to learn it,
Basically,
it does
got
come
my
off negative for them.
money back.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not going to be for everyone, and you're right, John. There's a learning curve to the controls. It's not as natural as something like Altspace, really, where in here you just kind of float around, pick things up, and
Click.
and we have the cool games too that people like Steven and others have made for us that have all the scripts that handle the card management and all that stuff.
The hand.
It's not so fancy, right? Everything looks nice, but you're making everything happen. You're moving all the components around. It can shuffle cards for you. It can roll dice for you. But that's about as advanced as it gets for like.
But it's not as immersive in 2D. That's
Yeah.
why people tend to appeal to tabletop sim.
So anyway, how many people here have actually? So I know I've heard three people now who've tried it. Who else has tried it? Let's just see a show of hands. Ghoster, John. How many people have tried Tabletop Simulator thus far? Ben.
I haven't.
Okay, and Mark too. So there's quite a few people who've given it a shot. How many people who haven't tried it would be interested in trying out a platform like that sometime at a future event? Megan?
Once I
Cool.
get out of Rift.
I'd be down.
Yeah, and I will say there's
My
always
visuals have
rooms
died, but I'm
open.
down.
There's always
Cool.
public rooms open. People looking to play games on there. It's
Cool.
It's not a dead
Play
community
Red
anymore.
chess. Or checkers.
So anyway, is there anything? So we can come back and talk about this in a bit. But what I wanted to do is show a quick video about Tabletop Simulator for those who aren't super familiar with it. This is going to go through 3 quick videos on YouTube real quick, just so everyone can have a look and kind of see what's going on. Hopefully this works.
Sell it or something.
Beaker, are you trying to get in on the conversation before we start the video? I wasn't sure if you were trying to get my attention.
Nope.
Okay. Touch controllers. If you play it out of VR, you just need a gaming PC, and then you can view the 3D graphics on a regular screen. And you really only need I think I've played Tabletop Simulator on a 700 series NVIDIA card before, and I think that probably you could go even lower than that. So anything else anybody wants to say about Tabletop Simulator? All right. So anyway, yeah.
Is
What's
there
up?
a way for us to so we can friend each other on here easy? Is there a way for us to link up Steam identifications, or can we do that on the Board Game Geek?
That's my hope. So that's why I want people to join the Board Game Geek Guild, because that's where we're going to share our Steam information. I think it's probably the easiest and the best way to do that. So if you go in there, I've already started a getting to know you thread where I just talk a little bit about myself. And that's a place where you can add your Steam name so that we can go and add each other as friends, and then we can start playing games together on Tabletop Simulator. All right? So the first step is the guild. Beaker, what's up?
How do I find that guild?
Let me load the presentation back in. I am going.
BoardGameGeek.com/guild/3049.
All right, everybody, don't get disoriented. I'm going to reset the space just to get my slides back. All right, so just hang with me for a second. Okay. There you go. So take a screenshot.
How do you take a screenshot?
All I see is
Oh.
a black screen.
How do you
You
take a
might need to
screenshot?
re-enter.
Is there everybody seeing a blank screen?
No.
I see it.
Okay. Cool. So if you take a screenshot of that, that is going to be the best place to go and take care of that.
Thank you.
How do
Sure.
you take the screenshot?
So if you go into there's a camera like to the bottom left.
Mm-hmm.
What are you
All right.
on?
So anyway,
Okay.
guys, I think that's the end of what I had planned for today. But at this point, we can just kind of
Very
like
well.
mingle and circulate if you want to. I'm going to leave the room open. And we can even use some of the games that are in there. If you want to play Love Letter or something that doesn't work correctly in here, I can show you how to launch a room so that you can play that. But I want to thank everybody for showing up. Thanks to Ghoster for filming and the Hive for doing this for us to allow us to stream this to YouTube. I think it's really going to add a lot to our community. But I'm really excited about what's going to happen going forward. You know, a lot of great new conversations today from new users, and I hope to see you guys back. So next week we're going to be at 6 o'clock. I like to shift it back and forth so we can pull Europe in every other week. So at 6 o'clock, we're going to talk about card games, and we're going to play Love Letter together. So I'm going to teach Love Letter again, and we're going to break into a bunch of different rooms and play games. All right, guys. Thank you. See you next week.